sensitive topic for everybody. We're all struggling with it, and I actually spoke to Joe yesterday. Joe called me. Joe Stoss. I just saw you just joined, and I said it's a little bit of a dangerous thing to talk about this live. And I am putting on Facebook because I know people always like to join us from Facebook. But I do think that we have to talk about it to a certain degree. But I would like at the same time that we remember that we all have different opinions, and it's okay to have different opinions, and it's okay to have different feelings about it. We're not here to judge each other for your different opinions and feelings, and it's not about who's wrong and right. We're happy to discuss things, but I do believe that this whole episode, as difficult as it has been, I thought it's actually brought out a lot of really powerful concepts. The fact that this has happened, the way it's happened, where it's happened. We're talking about, of course, a breakout in the Jewish community, that, and of course a video going viral, and then people starting to point fingers, and even before the video went viral, people were pointing fingers about people claiming to have that there's private religious gatherings going on in the community. So that's the situation that we find ourselves in. So I'm sure everyone has an opinion on it, and that's okay. And not everyone has to express their opinion or say their opinion, but people should be comfortable to express their opinion. But at the same time, it has to be done respectfully and understandably. And this is what I think is the most important point for now. We in Melbourne, Australia, in Victoria particularly, have been through ongoing on and off lockdowns for the last 18, 19 months. We have had the longest and harshest lockdowns, some of the longest and harshest lockdowns. There's other places in the world that have also, but we're definitely right up there with the most lockdowns and some of the harshest. And
you have some noisy. Can you fix the noisy? Now it's better. Yeah, it's okay. No.
And 18 months ago, if we were in this position, if we would have known that we were in this position, I think we would have been shocked that people are still kind of complying. So that's the first thing. This is not an excuse for anybody. So that's the first point. We just have to put things always in the bigger picture. That's not justifying any wrongdoing. Nobody should be doing wrong. We have to remember that this is a virus, which is real. This is a real danger to people. And every government has had their own ways of how to deal with it. And I believe that a huge percentage of the population disagrees. In America, when you disagree, you go and you protest in the streets and you find ways to do it. In Australia, that's illegal. There's no way of really properly protesting when you disagree with the government over here. Whether that's right or wrong, that's the way the Australian government works. It's not as easy as it in other countries, and there's other countries that have it even more difficult. But the fact is that when we live in a country that has particular laws, Torah in general obligates us to follow the laws of the land. That's the law. We actually have a blessing that most communities say traditionally for the government, that the government should be blessed and taken care of, etc. Because if not for governments, we would be in a terrible situation. And just think about if today, after this particular episode happened, if not for government, there'd probably be terrible riots going on against the Jewish community. for those people that are looking for scapegoats, and of course the Jewish community will very often be the scapegoat. So that's just a little bit of an introduction. We have to follow the law. We have to do in general what the government tells us to do, and particularly when it comes to something relating to our health that could be jeopardizing other people. There's a law in Torah which is called Dina de Malchus Adina, which means the law of the land is what stands. Okay, Dina, the law of the kingdom, of the government that you're living in, is the law. You can't negate that. You can't go against it. Now, there are exceptions. To be totally frank, we cannot deny that there are exceptions. It's not a blanket rule. If the government is forcing you to do things which are against Torah, then it would be a question, which one do you choose? So we can't just act as though, oh, whatever the government tells us we have to follow 100%, that's not Torah law, because then Torah law would be basically secular law, as long as it fits. So there are times when secular law and Torah law are in disagreement, and sometimes, if it's a health concern, then the secular law will override it, because then that would become the Torah law. Of course, it becomes questionable when it's actually a health law or not, so then it becomes questionable, and I think that's somewhat of a period that we are finding ourselves in this time, because on the one hand you can easily say, and I'm being frank with you, and I understand that many rabbis will not bring this point up. They'll just say, and most rabbis have just said, we've got to follow the law, and that's it, and that is correct. But to deny the fact that there is contention would be not seeing the other side of the picture. And the other side of the picture is that in other places, when it came to the beginning of the lockdown, for example, the Jewish community was the first community to close all shuls even before the government did it. At the beginning, the Jewish community closed way before anybody else. Our schools closed first, etc. Yeah, there was a leak in the community, and that's part of the reason. But also because of our overly concern, and we were super worried about anything to do with health. On the other side, if you were to contrast Jewish communities around the world, you would see that at this point, if they were to have in a similar situation to what we have, most communities in our situation would not be in lockdown, and synagogues would be open, etc. So it would be a difficult claim at the beginning. As soon as there was a risk, almost all communities throughout the world closed. But as time progressed, very often the communities had a stricter position to the government. Usually Jewish communities were stricter. I'm talking about over the last year and a half. But at times, and sometimes, but when the government opened, sometimes communities opened, like South Africa as an example. Sometimes the government opened and the rabbinate opened as well. Shuls opened. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes the rabbinate said, the chief rabbinate said, even though the government is allowing us, we're not going to do it. But sometimes they said, no, you could do it, but let's follow these restrictions. So it's difficult. It's a very difficult question to say at a time like this. What would be the halacha? Forget about the secular law. The secular law is the secular law of the place that you live in. That's dependent on the place. What would be the halacha right now? At the beginning of the pandemic, it was quite clear what the halacha was. We didn't know how to deal with it. Not that we still know how to deal with it, which is another whole equation. But in a way it was clearer 18 months ago than it is now. Because 18 months ago, anytime any community that was aware of a leak of a case in the community immediately shut down. Now, we're being told to shut down even before, and that's a whole question. Should you be shutting down? What level of risk is it? Etc. And that becomes a very big halachic question. Therefore, to give a clear halachic answer, I think, is quite a difficult task. Because on the one hand, you could say, well, it's health. It's pikuach nefesh. It's life at risk, and therefore that overtakes everything. But then there's the other claim that how long does that risk last for, and what about the other risks? What about the lists of the mental health risks and the separation from communal and social events and all those other risks that come a part of it? You know, what happens if this lasts for 20 years? That means for 20 years we don't have synagogue. You know, that these are all questions that make to decide a halacha in this question, in this particular circumstance, particularly difficult. And that's why when the government has allowed, my understanding, and this is just my own understanding, that at this point in time, now that it's seeped into the community, it's probably no longer halachic questions. Probably once it's in the community, it's probably quite clear that it would be forbidden to have shul in most cases. It could be still debatable in other places of the world. They still had it, even in that case, in the community. But for the standards that we've applied in Australia, I would say that it would be forbidden. But if you were to look in Australia, in Victoria, I would think that in general, when most of the time the situation was not that shuls generally were open when the government allowed us to open. So therefore you would think therefore that it wasn't a halachic decision, it was a legal decision, and therefore we were following the laws that we were following was because of the law, because the concept of dinner demachos dinner, the law of the land is the law of the land, and that's the reason why we're following it. Once it seeks into the community, definitely, but as I said, it's a very difficult concept to get your head around, and lots of rabbis have debated what's the correct approach. I know Joe wants me to talk about what is the halacha. The honest truth is I don't know, and there's so many different angles, and many different rabbis have given different opinions on it. I think generally the approach in Australia has been that we just, for now, being that the cases are low, we follow the government. When the government allows us to open, we are opening, at least after the initial first lockdown. That's my understanding of the general rabbinical take within the Victorian community. Now, there's the bigger issue. There's the bigger issue that has come out of the last few days with that video going viral. But the truth is that it started even before the video went viral, and this is something that I was hoping to focus on tonight. I'll be totally honest with you. I've thought a lot about what I would talk about tonight, but I didn't prepare much. The honest truth is, with the kids home and so many other things and getting a lot of phone calls and things going on, I haven't had the place or the time to actually sit and properly prepare a regular shir as I normally do. But I have prepared a text that I wanted to study with you. And that is this. Right at the beginning, on Saturday night already, there was fingers being pointed at people and blaming people. And I think there's, I suppose, at times space for that. To say, you know, who's responsible, why is this happening, were people being negligent, etc. But there's one thing Judaism has no space for, and that is not public shaming or naming, particularly in a time like this when everybody is vulnerable, everybody is anxious, everybody is going through a difficult time, and while some people may be laughing in a video, that doesn't mean that they didn't get through a lot of anxiety and issues till they got there. I'm not there. But definitely, when Jewish people start pointing fingers and trying to publicly shame each other, in my opinion, that's where the secular, outside, non-Jewish world starts. Anti-Semitism sometimes doesn't start in a vacuum by itself. Most of the information that the outside world, the outside the Jewish community got on whatever was happening was all from within the Jewish community. And my biggest problem with everything that happened, of course, doing anything illegal was totally wrong, stupid, etc. 100%. But from our perspective, and we as a community have to, by the way, I went to get tested today. not because I was not in a tier 1, I wasn't a tier 2, I wasn't close to anybody, but I just felt it was the right thing to do. Why? Because on Thursday I was in Caulfield. I wasn't even in any of the locations, but I was in Caulfield on Thursday, and I'm sure whoever was had the virus was already walking around on Thursday. So I decided that it would be the right thing. I was in Caulfield, I went to pick up my kid from kinder, so they told everyone to, so I went to get tested. Do I have any symptoms? No. Was I any either tier 1 or tier close cases? No. But I thought it was the right thing to do, that we should, anybody that was any doubt of a doubt that they could have come in contact with anybody, I think the right thing to do. It's not a big deal to go get tested. And that's what we should be doing.
Rabbi, is it worth mentioning the Hatzolah message on that topic? Because it may be quite a few people here haven't seen it.
I don't know if it's relevant to the people over here, depending on where they're living, but yes, Hatzolah did recommend that everybody from the community that's living within the Glen Ira and Port Phillip Council, or works there or has been there to get a test.
Or socialized there, yeah.
So that's why I personally went to get a test, and I think it was probably a lot quicker going to get a test over here in Keysborough than in one of the key, although I know that there's been a huge uptake in tests around that area. Adas had over 400 people tested at their school today. With that point in mind, what's wrong is wrong. We've got to do the right thing from a health perspective. But when people find that it's their responsibility to start naming and shaming and publicizing wrong things from our community or doing things like that, that's where the anti-Semitism starts from.
I agree, but I have to get my few words in. They themselves, the young boy who's the Coulson, he was flaunting it himself. He was making fun of the fact that they were having an engagement party and that there was surahs in the world.
Well, he wasn't. I'm not here to defend him. What he did was 100% wrong. Full stop. Nothing else. But he didn't put that video out, and thousands. I in my street around the corner they had a party. Okay, in Dingley. They're not Jewish people. Every person I've spoken to, Jewish or non-Jewish, has been telling me they're not keeping the laws. They weren't keeping the laws, at least not till yesterday. So the fact that he did it was 100% wrong. I'm not here to justify him. I'm not here to in any way justify anything that he did. What was wrong. But he never made that video go viral, and all the comments and name calling that he did, that's not expected. He never made fun of anybody in that video. He didn't call names. Happens to be they made a decision which was a wrong decision, was a bad, stupid decision to go and make a party in the middle of this lockdown. If he would have been any else in the world, maybe that would have been legal, but not in Victoria, and therefore he shouldn't have done it.
No.
And he shouldn't have done it. But who put out that video? Where did that video go out from?
One of the guests. One of the guests took that film.
And then one of the guests took that film, and then somebody else went and publicized it and sent it to all different Jewish different networks and publicized it. Who did that? I don't want to go into details, but that's wrong. That's wrong.
Well, it was wrong, but he made a joke of it though, and I saw the video several times.
I think we all saw the video several times, unfortunately. And it's once again, it's not to say, but he's not the only person making a joke. 65% of Victorians have been making jokes of these lockdowns because they're sick of it. That's not. But does that justify his actions? No. No. He was trying to say how what he's doing is very illegal because it's group therapy. That's just a stupid comment to make and funny at the time, but now he's eating his words 100%. But who gave anybody the right to go and publicly humiliate and send that video all over the place?
No, it was wrong. That was.
I'm sorry to say, and all the comments of people that go on to say even the police commissioner that went on to say that's selfish. How could he say it's selfish? Maybe how do you know what's going on? How could we judge people? And what I've learned about this thing is that everybody takes it from their own perspective. There's the senior citizen that has been vaccinated, that has one perspective. Then there's the other senior citizen that's not vaccinated, that is petrified, that just is satisfied when there's a lockdown. They just want there to be more and more lockdowns because that just makes them feel calmer, and they just want more. And then there's the young family that feels not very vulnerable. They don't feel very anxious about the actual virus because they think that they're not going to get it, and they're struggling at home with kids, and then they can't make a livelihood. And then there's other person that's a tradie that can go out to work every day and do his construction, and he couldn't care less if there's a thing. And then there's another guy that I know in my community that he hasn't had work for 9 months because he can't get any work. If he tries and he has to go into people's houses to do his job, and he can't. Another, hairdressers or people that are, and those people are not pros. So a lot of people, we take our positions based a lot on our own personal perspective. For some people, one guy tells me he loves the lockdowns, he's able to do his work 10 times better. You know what? That's a big percentage of the community, and therefore they'll be pro it because it just sounds good. And what does it bother? The streets are empty, less traffic. Why not? It just makes them feel safer. But what about all those people that are losing their livelihood or going insane or have all the kids at home that they can't take care of? So I'm not saying anyone is wrong, and people acting against the law is wrong. I'm not saying anybody's particular feelings are unjustified, but we have to understand that everybody is coming from a different perspective.
But after all you said, the police commissioner said they're selfish, and he's right. They're selfish. That was a selfish act with a silly sense of humour that was given, which I heard, but I didn't hear the exact words. I certainly wouldn't waste my time ringing up and saying, hey, you did the wrong thing, because that's not my bit. But other people, yes, they have. Apparently the whole group is devastated. But in my opinion, they should have known better. There was a doctor there, there was a lawyer there were people who know.
Leo, everyone agrees with you. They should have known better. That was wrong and it was a stupid move. But I don't think it's a fair move to say it's selfish. That's our own judgment to say. I will never say, when I see somebody doing something, to say that it's selfish. That's my own opinion upon them, and that's what causes anti-Semitism. When the commissioner goes and writes that and we go and write it, we can't say that. I'm sorry.
Rabbi, may I respond to Leo? I'd like to respond to Leo as well, if that's all right, because I understand there's a perspective from a member of the representative of the Orthodox community. I'm not identified as a member of the Orthodox community, so I can probably talk to Leo as a peer. And I totally support what you're saying, Rabbi, and I'm not a representative of the leadership there. So, Leo, all the issues you're raising, they're all valid. People are focused on it. But the danger with focusing on the one event and the one group of people is that we miss the bigger picture. There are serious community issues that need to be looked at, unity issues, and that there's a risk of overlooking those bigger problems because we are too focused on one event and one family. I'll give you an example. The concern about religious gatherings dressed up as group therapy sessions, which you may have seen mentioned, that's not suddenly August 2021. But what's behind that? Religious people feel very strongly, and it's part of their mental health. They need access and continuity for the religion. And there's been very little consultation with government, something called co-design, where the government, ideally goes to the leaders in the community and says, here's the goals we want to achieve. We don't know your religion as well as you do. Let's work together. Can you advise us what the practices will be that meet our goals and your goals? That collaborative conversation hasn't been happening much till recently. Does that help at all?
Yeah, it makes sense. The interesting thing a friend of mine said today, he said, if it was, let's say, Flemington area, and it was 50 Muslims having a Ramadan end of the season fest, we would all say, have a look at them, have a look at them. That's what he's saying. So now he's saying, now have a look at these guys.
Okay, I'll give you another perspective. That's what you said. I've seen that, but there's another perspective, and back onto the Jewish side, if I may, Rabbi. And I'm just going to read straight from a post I did in another forum. Chabad, many other Hasidic movements have a long and proud legacy of justifiable civil disobedience in the face of oppressive regimes. We've got to respect and understand that history. Okay, Chabad came from Russia and so on, as many other Hasidic groups did. My own family ancestry is part of that as well, so I understand it. And those regimes threatened the very existence of Judaism. We all know that, okay? So that mindset then comes across to Australia and other places where the government's a lot more tolerant and supportive of religion here, but traditionally, definitely we're not. So now if we come back to that individual event that you're talking about, there's a huge difference between a gathering of people who are fully vaccinated and a gathering of people who've had no vaccinations at all. The risk profile is vastly different. And in other countries, fully vaxxed, they meet every day and do exactly as the rabbi described, and there's very little concern. The UK have just relaxed restrictions. They provided concessions to fully vaxxed. So all that is being recognized and taken on board. Here, currently, it's not. And that's a very big difference. We don't know, unless someone on this chat knows right now, how many of the people at that gathering were fully vaccinated? What was the risk profile in real life? We actually don't know that. So people are prejudging and saying, well, none of the people were vaccinated, therefore it's a huge, they're jumping to conclusions.
There is, by the way, while I remember, I'll interrupt for a minute, 6 people.
I'm aware of that. I'm aware how many positive. Fully vaxxed can still test positive, but not be a risk. Okay, so this is a whole other conversation, medical conversation, but what Rabbi's referring to with the judging people, naming and shaming, being judge, jury, and executioner without all the facts, that is a cancer on our society, and that has to stop.
100%. I just want to intercede on 2 points, and then I really want to go on to what I believe was supposed to be the main topic of tonight, and that is this. If there was any family in Melbourne that I were to say is a selfless family, a family that is dedicated to the community, one of them would be one of those families. The Rubin family is the mother is dedicated to family purity. She gives up every night of the day to have women go to mikveh, family purity. She is a prison chaplain. She's helped lots of prisoners come out of addiction and terrible state, and she's invited them and welcomed them into her home in a selfless manner. Her husband has helped thousands of people with his therapy. So to say that they are selfish is really just a judgment on one of their long cases, and that's just really wrong. And the second point I want to say about the Muslim case, there was a breakout within the Muslim community, and when there was that breakout, somebody said to me, at that time, whatever it was, a week or 2 weeks ago, oh, it's the Muslims. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't like that, because just like the Muslims, it could happen to our community, and it's not right to judge them. It could be that they're not keeping the rules as well. It could be. I do believe that in general the Jewish community was just as good as keeping the rules as others. And I think Joe brought a few very interesting points, that for a person that goes to shul every single day, 3 times a day, and will change their whole schedule, will wake up an hour and a half earlier to be able to go and daven and pray with a minyan, and to suddenly take that away from them, I don't think anybody that doesn't have that experience really could understand what it's like, and that is to a certain degree like therapy. I could tell you from my own personal experience. So that is therapeutic, and it's not just a joke calling it. It's not just, I don't think, while some people have used it, almost 99% of the community has not used that concept and has not been going to these therapy sessions, but to say that it's not therapeutic and that it's not actual therapy, it definitely causes a lot of issues, and particularly people that are used to going every single day, I know people that would book their tickets around not missing, and they would book to miss as little money as possible. They'd pay extra. Now, I drive half an hour sometimes just to be able to daven with a minyan, not because I'm saying Kaddish, and then pile it on to people that have to say Kaddish. So it's just really not fair to place judgment. That's one point. But I understand people. That's the way we are as human beings. But when we go and put on social media concepts which are harmful and dangerous to our community, and when certain organizations will say something like shame on the rabbis or shame on those people that did it without any, there's no need for that. It's despicable, and they started and caused all of the hatred that came from the secular world. So I don't even, we never want to prosecute our fellow Jews. So God should bless every single Jew with health and happiness, and all the citizens of Victoria with health and happiness and well-being. But when we start and we love each other and we have care for each other and we don't try to find fault within each other, and that's Chabad's approach, by the way. We don't do it only when it's Chabad. We do it for everybody. One of the main campaigns, which is what I want to talk to about, the Rebbe's had 10 Mivtzoim campaigns, the 10th one, which he actually inaugurated almost 25 years ago to the date, which is what I wanted to talk about, was the mitzvah of Avat Yisrael, loving a fellow Jew. And I did a class about it just a few months ago, but I wanted to do a different perspective on it, because I think that's the call of an hour. We're told, we came recently from Tisha B'Av, and we're told that the temple was destroyed for hatred of one another. There's no reason for us to be ganging up on each other. Absolutely no reason. Yeah, we can call each other's false wrongs out, but to start calling people a shame, this is a situation that no one expects. This is not crimes against humanity. This is not thievery or murder or rape or pedophilia. This is people that should be more sensitive to the situation, and they're not, and that's wrong. They should be abiding the laws, that they're not, and it's wrong. But we should not start, because of that, start taking things out of proportion and start saying, because that's how you get those type of comments from that person from Royal Melbourne, where they start saying what they say to gas people. Because when we in our community can't find the unity within our community, and we have to start name calling people, that's absolutely wrong. So let's get into a little bit of text. And what I wanted to study with you for the next few minutes, you're welcome to interrupt me again, I don't want to get too, is chapter 32 of the book of Tanya. Chapter 32 of the book of Tanya, I've spoken about ideas from this all the time. It's known, 32 means lave. The Hebrew word is lamed bet, which means lave, means the heart. It's the heart of Tanya. And it's all about what it means to have love for your fellow. Now the question is like this. I was talking to you about how 25 years ago on Chai Elul, we are now, today was Tet Elul, exactly 9 days from today, in 1976, sorry, it wasn't 25 years ago, it was 45 years ago, I think I said 1976, 45 years ago at Chai Elul, 9 days from today, 45 years ago, it's the day of the birth of the founder of the Chabad movement and the Hasidic movement, the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe was having a Farbrengen, a Hasidic gathering, before Corona time, so it was allowed. At the gathering, he announced he was starting a new campaign. This campaign was different to any other campaign because it was not something specific, it was something very general. It was something that was going to take up our entire lives, every single element of it. That was the mitzvah of Avas Yisrael. Now, mitzvah of Avas Yisrael, what do you mean? It's an old mitzvah of the Torah. But he was going to make a campaign about it, that we as people should find ways to do acts of kindness for each other. He said, for example, starting free loan societies for our fellow Jews that need help. Start going in the streets and showing love to people and kindness to people and finding a good way to share goodness and giving charity, etc. So that was started almost exactly 45 years ago to this day. And it's all based on the concept that we have in this chapter. So let's actually look inside. Chapter 32. And the previous chapter spoke about how not making the body the main focus, but the main joy should be the joy of the soul. He says, if you focused on your soul, and I'm going to get into this, I'll explain to you, don't get lost as I talk, but I'll explain everything as we go along. He says, if you focused on your soul, remember the great sage Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva took the line from the Torah which says, you should love your fellow as yourself, and he said, that's the whole principle of the entire Torah. Loving your fellow as yourself. Like Hillel, who was very similar, who lived several decades before Rabbi Akiva, he said, the whole Torah is do not do unto others that you don't like done by yourself. If you don't like somebody calling you selfish, then don't call them selfish, for example. So loving your fellow as yourself. Now, how can you love your fellow? It's the same concept. Loving your fellow as yourself is don't. The general rule, he says, if you wanted to take the whole Torah, what's the main principle of the Torah? If you were to study all the Torah and you didn't have love for your fellow, you missed the point. You missed the main and most crucial point of the Torah, which is having love and respect for your fellow Jew, for your fellow person, not just Jew. He says, how could you love it? How is it possible for you to show any type of love to another person the same way that we love ourselves? That seemingly is impossible. He says, the straight and easy way to come to the mitzvah of love your fellow as yourself, to every single person, every single Jew, from whether he's the greatest or he's the smallest, no matter what type of stature, no matter what level of religiosity he has, or interest, or kindness, or level of respect he has. He says, if he's a person, that he doesn't take his body, he's not all focused on bodily acts, he doesn't all care about what the person looks like on the outside, he's focused on what the person's like on the inside. V'hanefesh v'haruach. And therefore now he says, I'm not going to look at the person the way the person acts or looks on the outside, but I recognize that every single person has a soul, and that soul is divine and deep. Who knows how great that soul is in its root and its source? Now, for those that have studied chapter Tanya in the past with me, I teach Tanya on a Shabbos morning, so you would know that in the second chapter of Tanya, the beginning part of Tanya, we go on to describe exactly what a soul is and where it comes from. It's a part of God. So this is more meaningful than that perspective, but even if you haven't got that, you don't have that exact understanding of exactly what a soul is, you could still appreciate. The soul is something that is so pure, holy, it's a part of God. And if that's the core of, that's who you consider yourself, if you stop judging yourself by what has happened to you or what you've done or what you look like, but your core, which is pure and great, then that's the way you will see your fellow as well. He says, the truth is, Shukulan Masimois, the truth is that they're all actually equal. And not only equal, yet separate. As in, he says, V'av echad l'kulona, and there's one Father. So we are one from one source. Every soul of every Jewish person comes from one place. One Father. The Torah says that Bonim atem la'Hashem Elokechem. You are the children. We said it actually in the recent weeks in the Torah. You are the children to Hashem, your God. Children come from one father, one parent. So we all have the same source. We all come from the same place. And therefore he says, and that's why all the Jewish people are actually called Achim Mamish. The common root of the one God is that all of Israel are called brothers. We're called brothers, not just like like in theory we're brothers. No. In actuality. Because you may say, hold on, how can I be a brother? I'm not the person's brother. I have a different mum. Maybe I'm a brother from another mother. That's what we used to say, right? I had one of my best friends was born on the same day as me. He looks similar to me. He stayed in my house for a few years, and he is my best friend. I haven't been in contact with him. He lives on the other side of the world, in Texas. But we were very close friends, and we were literally born on the same day. And we used to say we're a brother from another mother. But he's saying that no, we're not brothers from another mother, because your body may come from another mother. Your bodies come from your parents. But if you're not looking at the body, if you're looking at the soul all comes from the same source. Every single Jew is really a soul. And the soul comes from a very powerful source. We're all one and the same. The only difference is what divides us is our bodies. The bodies are what is distinct from each other. So therefore he says, if you were to talk about that, if you look at it in that perspective, really, are we brothers? We're not only more than brothers, we're even one and the same thing. Just like if you have two brothers. Why are they brothers? What makes them biological is because they have the same parent, same mother and father. They're made up of the same blood, the same biological makeup. They were once part of the same parents. Only what happens is they were then developed, in the mother's womb, they were developed into a unique person. And they become separate. But truthfully, they're all one. They come from the same source. Now, if you think about it like that, you remember that all of us have that type of soul. Our souls are directly a part of God. That's what it exclaims in chapter 2 of Tanya. And therefore he says, V'lachein, and therefore if you were to make your body the main thing, and nafsham to further, and you make what's the secondary part, you make it your soul. In other words, if you say, no, I've got a bodily, materialistic, physical life. So then you're going to say, like most people focus on their bodily life. How do I feel? How do I look? How do I exercise? How's my body doing? It's important. We've got to take care of our bodies. But if you were to make your body the main thing, your focus is on your bodily aspects, your materialistic life. If your focus of your life is the materialistic elements of your life, so it says then it was actually impossible that you should have true love between you and your fellow brothers. The only type of love that you can have is a love which is dependent on an external factor. Why? Because you are not a true love, not the sense that we're saying right now, is a sense of being one, of oneness, of togetherness, of being part and parcel of the same thing, as though the other person and I cannot be separated. So there's an interesting Yerushalmi. I've said this in other ways, but I believe it's actually from the Yerushalmi. I'll stop for a second. They're sharing the screen for a second. And the Yerushalmi says something like this. The Yerushalmi is the Jerusalem Talmud written some 1800 years ago. Over there it says, there's a concept in halakha that says, what happens if a person makes an oath? And an oath that says, I will not have benefit from, I won't eat carobs. The law is he's not allowed to eat carobs. He's made that oath. Okay. Now what happens if this person says, I don't like so and so, and therefore I'm making a, I was about to say Joe Schmo, but we actually have a Joe online, so I wasn't sure if that's right. So show. If Mr. in yeshivic and Talmudic literature, we always like to give the example of, when we're looking for a name, we always like to say Reuven and Shimon. because those are like the 12 sons of Yaakov. So you usually don't have examples with more than 12. So you go Reuven, Shimon, Levi. The Talmud also goes, whenever the Talmud wants to give examples of Joe Schmo, of person A and person B, it will say Reuven, Shimon. And then my teacher in school when I was in year 6, he would do that. He would go through the class and he would say, Reuven, what happens if Reuven did this? And Shimon, and once one of the boys in the class says, Rabbi, it's so not nice. There's a boy in our class named Reuven. And so it was always a failure because we always thought that we were picking and using him as the example of the person that's bad. But let's say you don't like Mr. Reuven. Reuven's on, there's a Reuven on, so we can't use the example of Reuven. What is there anybody Shimon? Let's say you don't like Shimon. Okay, you, Mr. Abraham, don't like Shimon, and you say, I'm taking an oath that I'm not going to have any benefit from Shimon. Why would you do such a thing? You don't want to have any type of association. So in order that you won't have any association, you make an oath, and therefore you can't. Now the law is like this. What happens if you make an oath and you regret the oath? How do you do it? What do you do? Let's say you take an oath that you're not eating chocolate. But then one day you got a crazy craving for chocolate and you just can't stand it anymore. You don't want to break your oath. It's against the Torah to break your oath. So what do? There's a concept called Hatarat Nadarim. You can annul the vow. The way you annul a vow is you go to either a rabbi, an expert, or you go to lay people, and they have to find a way for you to annul the vow. So the way they would do it, they would say, it's like, if you knew the situation, would you have taken upon when you did it? And hopefully the person has the sense to say, no, if I would have realized the type of craving I'm having now, I would never have taken on the first one. And the person says, well, therefore, you never took it on with the full sense of the understanding of the meaning, and therefore it's annulled. So therefore it says, what happens if a person took up on an oath that says, I'm never having any benefit from Mr. Shimon. I never want to have benefit. Now he's changed his mind. He wants to have benefit from Shimon. So he goes to the rabbi. What does the rabbi say? Says the Jerusalem Talmud, he should go and he should say to the person, tell me something. What happens if you're working in your shop, and while you're working in a shop as a blacksmith, or you as a tradie, and you're using a hammer, and you take a hammer and you bang your hand? Do you think the right thing for you to do is to take the hammer and to bang the other hand? And the person says no. He says, He says, why not? He says, well, why would I hurt myself? I made a mistake. Why would I hurt myself? He says, you understand. The same thing is with that fella that you took the oath from. If you would have realized when you took the oath that you're actually hurting yourself by making that oath against them and trying to be mean or horrible to that person or whatever it is, you're actually hurting yourself. Because you and that person are actually one and the same person. Because you come from the same source. And that's actually one of the ways of how it gives, of how you would annul a vow between two people that have... or between a person that's made a vow not to have benefit from another person.
Rabbi, can I share an extension of that in just my simple layman's terms? Exactly that concept. Now, I won't use a parenting example because maybe not everyone's a parent, but we're certainly all part of a family. Everyone here be part of a family. So, putting aside the situation we started talking about locally, imagine if a family member borrows your car and goes ahead and does something stupid and has an accident and gets hurt. So initially when that happens, you get until you hear that they got hurt, you're angry, annoyed, they've damaged your property, they've created a public spectacle, they've, caused all sorts of costs and damage. But once you know that your family member's injured, the whole picture changes. As a member of your family, your next focus is you're very worried about how are they impacted? What can you do to help them recover? The focus changes 180 degrees. Yeah, I think we can all relate to that. And the people that we started talking about at the beginning of this, they're our family.
100%.
And if we don't look after them, it'll come back to bite us.
That's right. And that's what I said at the beginning, and that's exactly where I was going, and that's why I'm teaching this. That when we start with this anti-self and we start writing and trying to shame each other, and it's okay for us to point out when people have done something wrong, that's okay to say that this is wrong, and to encourage people to keep the law, and to encourage people to get tested or vaccinated or whatever you believe is the right way to do things, that's good. That's the right thing to do. But it's never okay to start trying to name call or make judgments on other people. That's not okay. Okay? Anyway, let's get back to the text. Because ultimately by us naming and giving name on other people, we're making that name back on ourselves. So he says the only way a person that is a materialistically focused person can have a true love for another person, it's only if it's a love that is dependent on external means. They'll love the person, let's say they're gaining something from them. He thinks the person is beautiful, he thinks the person is smart, he thinks the person is kind, he thinks the person is generous, or he enjoys talking to that person. But it's not an essential bond. But when the love that you have for another fellow is because you are essentially one, it's not dependent on anything. You are essentially one whether you like them or not, whether they talk to you, whether you can relate to them or not, you are their brother. It's an essential bond, it's not dependent on anything. Okay, he's got a big note over here, but we're not going to get into it. And now he goes on, he starts off with the statement from Rabbi Akiva, and now he goes into the statement of Hillel. And he says, and that's why Hillel said about fulfillment of this mitzvah of loving your fellow, this is the entire Torah. And the rest of it is just the explanation. Why? Why is this concept of being able to see your fellow as a part and parcel of yourself, as by hurting them you're really hurting yourself? Why is this the entire Torah? Why is this the most important part? How could Hillel, there's 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. There's thousands of laws, millions of explanations, infinite amount of layers of interpretation. Yet he comes and he says, this is the entire Torah. How could he say that? And he says something really powerful. This is the author of the Tanya explains this. He is sod v'shorish kol Torah. He says, like, listen, the root and purpose of the entire Torah. Imagine somebody comes up to you and says, I want to tell you what the root and the source of the entire Torah. What was the root and the purpose? The Torah is God's manual for mankind, why he created mankind. And I'm going to tell you the reason of why he gave you the Torah. What was his manual? I'll tell you what his reasoning is. The entire purpose of the Torah, you want to know what the biggest secret is? The source, the root, is to elevate the soul over the body. To mean that you should be more spiritually and soul focused. Way above. Maila means way above until the root of all worlds. In other words, he says the purpose of all the Torah, you have all these mitzvot to put on tefillin and to pray and to keep Shabbat and to give charity and to kosher and Yom Kippur, all those other laws, thousands of laws. You know why they're all there? In order for you to be able to reach a level where your soul is more important than your body. When you focused more on your soul than you focused on your body. He says, "V'gam the hamshich oren seif baruchu beknesses," and also to draw down infinite light into the community of Israel, which is the source of the Jewish people, like it explained earlier. Meaning, the Hainu b'makar neshamis kol Yisrael, in the source of where all Jewish people come from, limhavei echad bi'echad, that they should be one made up with the other. So now, getting back to our conversation I started off with. When we look at another fellow as a family member, as your brother, and you see that they have done wrong, if your approach is, I'm now going to publicly shame them or humiliate them, then I wouldn't want to be your relative. But if you're a normal and sane person, you would never do that to your child, to your brother, to public shame and humiliate, or to call names. You would call out their wrong. You would privately and correctly and nicely correct what they've done wrong and tell them how they're wrong. But to publicly harass and abuse, you would never do that to your own sibling if you were a normal, healthy person. And therefore he says, and not, God forbid, if there is disunity amongst the Jewish people. Because he says like this, what's the power of unity? There's a famous line, you know the prayer, Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha, or we sing it, it's the end of our prayers, Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha, the end of the prayers that we say the Amidah every day. It says over there this powerful line. He says, Barcheinu Avinu Kulanu Ki Echad Be'or Panecha. Our Father blesses us, Kulanu Ki Echad Be'or Panecha. When are we blessed by God? You know, you want God to reside amongst the Jewish people. It's when we're united. The strongest force is when you have an infinite force with you. When we as the Jewish people are united, then we have the infinite light of God shining upon us. He says God doesn't reside in fragmented places. If you got a vessel, a bowl, so to speak, that is full of holes, it won't be able to hold. It can't hold the light. But when we have a bowl which is full, if it's full, it will be able to hold the water. When we as Jewish people are united, we are a complete vessel. Nothing spills out. There's no cracks. There's no holes. When we're ununited, then there starts to be holes and things. The water starts to seep out. That water is the godly power, infinite power. So God, it says, Baruchenu Avinu Kulanu Ki Echad. When we are united, God blesses us. But when we turn on each other, that creates holes, and that's what allows the rest of the world to have negative impacts, anti-Semitism, and negative things happen to us. But that won't happen if we're united. Okay, there's a lot more we can discuss, but I just wanted to share that thought with you. That oh, hey Fritz, nice to see you. The thought that I just wanted to leave off with tonight, as I mentioned, in a crazy time for all of us, and particularly I've had personally struggled with the lockdowns, trying to help things with the community and kids at home, whatever it is. But this whole episode has definitely been very disturbing in many, many ways. From the behavior of what people did wrong. But for me, what was far more disturbing was the reaction. When a fellow Jew started calling, you know, when a lady from the Royal Melbourne Hospital or whatever it is starts calling and says, whatever, gas chambers, God forbid, it irks me, it shakes me a bit. But when my fellow Jew starts saying things like, go to hell, or whatever else fellow Jews said, or who do you think, whatever type of names people called, that really bothers me. That shakes me to my core. Because I know that when we as Jews start calling each other's names, then we're opening up cracks for the rest of the world to join in. And they don't do it in the same way that we do it.
Rabbi, may I share in the chat? I've just copied and about to paste an extract from the Hatzalah email about positive steps that people can take.
Yes.
Would that be okay in case people haven't seen the message? I'll just paste that now.
Yeah, I'll just mention the main point that it says that it's now in the community, and the Department of Health is working to find out how we can stop the spread. It's now critical that everyone who lives, works and socializes in the city of Port Phillip and Glen Ira gets tested immediately. And the more people get tested, the quicker the restrictions will be lifted, and Chagim are only a few weeks away. I actually told my wife that the rate it was going before this, forget about the Caulfield, but it seemed like from when we went into lockdown, normally the numbers go down eventually, but it seems like the numbers were only going up, even before it came to the Caulfield area. I said, it doesn't look like we're going to be open for the Chagim. And maybe now with this hard lockdown and this little scare, maybe we actually have a chance now, because maybe this lockdown may actually work.
Yeah,
so,
there is a very positive opportunity in the Hatzolah message. If I can briefly talk to just the medical side of it, is one of the big unknowns with COVID is how many people are infectious but never get any symptoms, because in general in Australia we don't have widespread testing of people unless they have symptoms. All the messaging talks about that. The Jewish community has an opportunity right now for everyone to get tested, including people who don't have symptoms and haven't even been to an exposure site. And the data collected from that would be immensely useful.
Agreed. And that's why I went for a test today. So if anybody wants to, and it's not that bad. It was my first test. I've never had come any close to anything or had any symptoms that I actually thought was other than, you know, my regular allergies that I get once in a while.
I've had 3 of them, and the larger nose helps.
It's not that bad. It's really not that bad. I was a little bit more. I think it took exactly 5 seconds. So it's really not that bad. But if you've been anywhere around the Caulfield area or been around people that have done it, I don't see why you shouldn't. And it's a good thing to do. Yeah, as the lady that was asking me the questions as I went, so why are you here? I said, it's because I felt it was the right thing. I was in time, and there may have been someone who thought it was the right thing. She's like, yeah, you're doing the right thing. So it certainly is the right thing to do. If you feel like you have had any contact with any other people, if you've been isolated in your home for the last 2 weeks, or you haven't been anywhere around anything, then I don't see that there would be that much reason for you to do it. Yeah, I'll just leave it. If anybody else has any questions or comments on what I said, the main point that I'm saying is that we are all one and the same. We're all brothers, and we've got to stick together. And by us sticking together, then God will reside within us, and we will have infinite blessing. And my hope is that by bringing to the fore this negativity, which, by the way, that's the greatness of the internet era, the social media era, that when something negative happens, if something like this negative would have happened before the internet era, it would not have been nearly as bad. It would have been possibly an article. I don't think it would barely have even got out. But it allows people to express negative things, which allows us to wake up within ourselves and shake us to our core. And it's my hope that even those Jewish people that have written, and some of them I know myself, written mean things or whatever it is, will wake up and say, hey, that's not us. That's not us. That's not what we do. And that will flow over to the general population.
Is it worth mentioning?
A loving and peaceful society.
Rabbi, just the fact that it's the month of Elul, is it worth mentioning the relevance of all of this to the spirit of Elul?
100%. And there is no greater message going into Elul to than about having love and peace and non-judgment, and at the same time keeping safe and doing the right thing. There's one of the acronyms for Elul is Inali Yadai which is talking about safety. Sometimes you give you a place to reach. And there's also one more little small point if you want to talk about relevance to the times. In this week's portion, today's portion actually of the Torah reading, it talks about safety precautions, and that if you build a property and there's a roof that's going to have a flat roof for people to walk on, you have to make sure that you build a fence, which is an understanding for anything that there's a danger. We have to build a fence around those dangers to protect ourselves. So thousands of years ago, the Torah was telling us that when we do find ourselves in a dangerous situation, we must do whatever we can to protect ourselves. Okay. Any other questions or points, arguments, distractions, discussions? No?
I apologize for being late.
No problem. Have a good night, Leon and Irene. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Leo.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Fritz. Thank you, Yochanan.
Oh, thank you very much. Laila Tov.
Thank you, Noah. Have a good night.
Yeah, Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi. I think that went very, very well.
Thanks, Joe. As I mentioned, I wasn't going to talk about it, but then I thought that